3 weeks later, Serena Caldwell held her daughter against her chest and understood something her father had tried to teach her entire life. Survival was not the same thing as surrender. Pain could break a person, or it could rebuild them into someone the world no longer recognized. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft breathing of her newborn baby. Nadia sat asleep in the corner chair with her shoes kicked off and a blanket over her shoulders. Serena looked down at her daughter's tiny face and whispered the first promise she would ever make to her. You will never beg for love. You will never fear being abandoned. And nobody will ever make you feel powerless again. She named her Reina, after Raymond. But while Serena was learning how to be a mother, Derek was busy destroying himself without realizing it. Because some people mistake silence for weakness. They think if the person they hurt stops arguing, stops crying, stops chasing them, then they have one. Derek thought he had one. He moved Claudia into the condo less than 2 months after the divorce papers were filed. Claudia posted photos online almost immediately. Expensive dinners, hotel rooftops, champagne glasses. Captions about finally choosing happiness. Serena saw none of it. Nadia blocked every account before Serena even thought to look. Meanwhile, Serena disappeared quietly. No lawsuits, no angry messages, no public drama. And that silence started bothering Derek more than any fight ever could. Because narcissists expect pain to stay visible. They need to watch the wound they created. Serena gave him nothing. No begging. No revenge. No breakdown he could point to and call proof that he still mattered. What Derek did not know was that every single week Serena sat inside conference rooms with attorneys, financial advisors, security consultants, and executives who had worked with her father for decades behind the scenes. And every person at those tables already knew her name. Not as Derek's wife, as Raymond Hartley's daughter. The truth slowly unfolded, piece by piece. Raymond Caldwell had never actually been Raymond Caldwell. His real name was Raymond Hartley, founder of Hartley Industrial Holdings, one of the largest private infrastructure investment groups in the country. 35 years earlier, after his wife died unexpectedly, Raymond vanished from public life completely. He transferred operational control of the company, changed his name legally, and lived quietly while his investments multiplied in silence. The janitor job was never about money. It was about disappearing. It was about raising Serena far away from the kind of wealth that destroys people before they learn who they are. And now, every lawyer in those meetings repeated the same sentence. To Serena, your father prepared for this. Not just the inheritance. Everything. The stolen money. The affair, the divorce, even the fire. Because the neighbor's security cameras had captured all of it. Derek standing beside the car, Claudia laughing, the gasoline can, the match. The police investigation moved slowly at first because Derek's family had connections, but money leaves trails and arrogance leaves fingerprints. Within 4 months, insurance investigators reopened the case entirely after discovering inconsistencies in Derek's statements. That was the beginning of the collapse. The first thing Claudia noticed was the freezing of their joint accounts. Then came the subpoenas. Then the calls from attorneys. Then Derek losing his job after the fraud investigation became public inside his company. Stress changed him quickly. He stopped sleeping, started drinking, started screaming at Claudia. Over tiny things like dirty dishes and unanswered texts, because underneath every selfish man is usually a terrified one. And terror had finally arrived. Meanwhile, Serena bought nothing extravagant. That confused people the most. No mansion. No designer obsession. No interviews. She rented a modest brownstone near the ocean, hired full-time security. Nobody noticed. Created scholarship foundations in her father's name, and spent most nights holding her daughter while reading the journals Raymond had left behind. One entry stopped her cold. If wealth ever enters your life, baby girl, use it to build doors for people who were never given keys. That sentence became the center of everything. Within a year, Serena quietly funded housing programs for single mothers, paid off medical debt for hundreds of families, and established legal aid services for women escaping abusive marriages. Nobody knew the donor's identity, but eventually, secrets that large began to leak. And the day the first article appeared online, Derek saw it while sitting in a nearly empty apartment, with final notice letters spread across his kitchen table. Secret heiress behind $5 billion Hartley fortune revealed. He clicked the article, laughing at first. Then he saw Serena's photo, then the number. $5 billion. Witnesses later said Derek went completely pale. Claudia thought it was fake until she started searching the company records herself. But the deeper she looked, the worse it became. Private jets, commercial holdings, real estate portfolios, international investments. All of it real. All of it Serena's. And suddenly, every memory became poison. The burned car, the divorce papers, the hospital bag, the match. One single moment they both realized the truth. They had not destroyed a helpless woman. They had abandoned the daughter of a hidden empire. And worse than losing the money was understanding who Serena had become without them. Untouchable. Not because of wealth. It's because she no longer needed anything from anyone who had hurt her. 6 months later, Derek requested a meeting through attorneys, then another, then another. Serena declined every single one. Finally, he sent a handwritten letter. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Serena read it once while rocking baby Reina to sleep. Then she folded it carefully and placed it into a box with every other piece of evidence from that chapter of her life. Not out of anger, out of closure, because some apologies arrived long after they stopped mattering. Of her father's death, Serena stood beside his grave, holding Reina in her arms, while the wind moved softly through the cemetery trees. You were right, Daddy, she whispered. I was never powerless. Then she smiled for the first time, in a very long while. Not because the pain disappeared, but because it no longer owned her. Derek did not answer her right away. He just stood there in that parking garage with his hands trembling slightly at his sides, staring at the concrete floor like the ground itself had shifted beneath him. Above them, faintly through the ceiling, came the muffled sound of applause. From the ballroom upstairs, applause for Serena, for the woman he had once looked in the eye and called worthless. Claudia stepped closer. Derek, say something. And when he finally looked up, there was something gone from his face that had always been there before. Arrogance, certainty, the belief that he could burn down another person's life and walk away untouched. She knew, he whispered. Claudia frowned. What? She knew the whole time, not just about the affair, not just about the money, about them, about who they really were. And suddenly Derek understood the true horror of what Serena had done. She had not destroyed them in anger. She had not lashed out emotionally or publicly humiliated them or screamed for revenge. She had simply stepped aside and allowed them to become fully visible to everyone, to employers, to attorneys, to investors, to themselves. Because once Serena stopped carrying the weight of protecting Derek's image, his real character collapsed under its own gravity. Claudia leaned against the cold concrete wall, breathing too fast now. We can still fix this, she said quickly, desperately. Okay, we explain. We negotiate. She's not cruel, Derek. She's not. Derek laughed, a broken sound. Not because Claudia was wrong, but because Serena was not cruel. Cruel people burn pregnant women's cars to impress their mistresses. Serena had done something far worse. She had been fair. Every consequence they faced had come from decisions they themselves made. Serena had simply stopped shielding them from the results. And deep down, Derek knew that made everything irreversible. Upstairs, Serena finished her speech beneath the golden lights of the ballroom. Investors stood applauding while cameras flashed across the room. But Serena barely noticed any of it, because across the crowd, near the back of the room beside the service entrance, she saw an elderly janitor quietly replacing a trash liner. For one suspended second, it felt like seeing her father again. The same careful movements, the same invisible presence, the same dignity. After the applause ended, Serena crossed the ballroom floor herself and thanked him personally before leaving. The stage? The man looked startled. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Yes, Serena replied. I really did. Then she handed him her card. 3 weeks later, his granddaughter's college tuition was fully funded through the Raymond Caldwell Foundation. That was the thing about Serena. Money never changed the center of her. Pain did not harden her into cruelty. It clarified her. By winter, Derek's fraud case had escalated into criminal proceedings. Claudia's firm officially collapsed after losing nearly every remaining client. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. The people who once surrounded them for status and proximity vanished the moment there was nothing left to gain. And for the first time in their adult lives, both of them were forced to sit alone with themselves. No audience. No performance. No one else to blame. One snowy afternoon in January, Serena received a final letter from Derek. Unlike the others, this one was short. I don't expect forgiveness anymore. I just need you to know I finally understand what your father was protecting. Serena folded the letter carefully and placed it into a drawer without responding. Then she walked into the nursery, where little Joy Raymond Caldwell was asleep beneath a pale yellow blanket, one tiny hand curled near her cheek. Serena stood there for a long time, watching her daughter breathe, and she realized something extraordinary. For months, she had believed the story was about revenge, but it never was. Her father had not spent 8 years building a financial empire around her so she could destroy 2 miserable people. He built it so she would never again have to stay. Somewhere she was unloved out of fear. That was the real inheritance. Not the billions. Freedom. Freedom to walk away. Freedom to protect her daughter. Freedom to choose peace instead of survival. That night, Serena drove alone to the cemetery carrying fresh yellow roses. Snow dusted the ground around Raymond's grave in soft white silence. Brushed snow from the headstone and smiled. "You were right about everything, Daddy," she whispered. "Hey." The wind moved gently through the trees. And for the first time since the hospital room, since the funeral, since the fire, Serena no longer felt like she was carrying grief alone, because love that deep does not disappear. It becomes part of who you are. She touched the pearls resting. At her throat, looked up at the winter sky, and breathed in slowly. One breath, baby girl, then another, then another. That's all courage ever was. Claudia's voice echoed through the parking garage, sharp and broken. The job, the apartment, the contracts, it was Serena. All of it was Serena. Derek leaned against the cold concrete pillar without answering. His face looked hollow now, drained of the confidence he had worn like armor his entire life. "You left a billionaire," Claudia whispered, almost unable to breathe through the words. "You divorced a billionaire. You burned a billionaire's car while she was pregnant." Her voice cracked completely then. "And now we have nothing." The silence that followed felt enormous, because for the first time both of them finally understood the truth. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. They had looked at grief and thought it meant helplessness. They had seen a quiet woman standing beside a grave and believed she had nobody left in the world. They were wrong. 3 days later, Serena agreed to meet Derek one final time inside her attorney's office. Neutral ground, no emotion, no drama. Just closure. Derek arrived early, wearing the same expensive watch he used to adjust every time he was nervous. Except now the watch looked too large on him somehow, like it belonged to a previous version of his life. Serena entered carrying Joy against her chest. 7 months old now. Calm. Watching the world with those deep, steady eyes Raymond once had. Derek looked at the baby first, then at Serena, and down at his hands. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Derek swallowed hard. "I never thought I know," Serena interrupted softly. And somehow that hurt him more than anger. Would have. Because she was right. He never thought. Not about consequences, not about loyalty. It's not about the woman who sat beside hospital beds while he emptied their bank account behind her back. It's not about the father quietly watching everything. Serena reached into her coat pocket and slid a photograph across the table. Raymond Caldwell, standing outside Jefferson Elementary in his janitor uniform. One hand resting on a mop handle, smiling at the camera with the peaceful expression of a man who understood exactly who he was. Derek stared at the photo for a very long time. He knew Serena said quietly. Before the divorce? Before the fire? Before any of it? Derek closed his eyes. He knew what kind of man you were. He made sure that when everything collapsed, me and Joy would still be standing. The room went silent again. Not hostile silence. Final silence. The kind that arrives when there is nothing left to argue about. Serena stood slowly and adjusted the blanket around Joy. When you burned that car, she said calmly, you thought you were destroying my life. Her eyes met his one last time. But that was actually the moment my father's plan began. Derek looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe sorry, maybe please, maybe I loved you once. But some doors close so completely that words arrive too late to even knock. Serena walked toward the office door, then paused briefly. I think my father would have found the irony funny, she said. And then she left. Derek remained alone in that conference room holding the photograph of a man he had underestimated until it ruined him. Outside, the Atlanta sunset painted, the city in deep gold and orange. Serena drove home quietly while Joy slept peacefully in the back seat. Nadia sat beside her in comfortable silence, shoes kicked off against the dashboard the way she always did. After a while, Serena opened the old flip phone again. Her father's voice filled the car softly. You were never my burden, never my sacrifice. You were my reason. Serena smiled through tears she no longer tried to hide. At a red light, she glanced into the rearview mirror at her daughter. Tiny hands, sleepy eyes. Safe, loved, protected. You are brilliant, Serena whispered. You are worthy. You are loved beyond measure. The same words passed down like an inheritance greater than money. From a father to a daughter, to a granddaughter he had protected before he ever had the chance to hold her. And in that moment, Serena finally understood what her father had truly left behind. Not billions, not buildings, not corporations, but security, dignity, freedom, the ability to walk away from people who confuse love with control, the ability to raise her daughter without fear, the ability to survive betrayal without becoming bitter. That was the real fortune Raymond Caldwell built, a love so deliberate, so patient, and so enduring that even death could not erase it.